On some level, did he know? He packed it in every day. With 5 a.m, I'm up, I'm gonna go to the gym, I'm gonna come back, I'm gonna have my protein shake that mom made for me. Wow, he's really going from one thing to the next. But you know what? He was packing it in. He's making the most out of every day, which again, that's something I think many of us aspire to do.
Anthony lived that way potentially as if he knew his time was short. He lived and squeezed every ounce of juice and connection out of life that he could.
Anthony almost was 17 years old when he took his life. And what an amazing lifetime packed into those short years. Are there things that now you look back on and say, we missed that?
I mean, yeah, without question. The crux of our challenge was, where does his high functioning autism start and end, and where does him being a teenager start and end? And I think that was really our biggest challenge as parents of a high functioning autistic child. I'm Neal and my wife Samara and I are grateful you're here for this unique podcast experience. We share the story of the loss of our son Anthony, the movement that has grown out of the unimaginable grief, and the legacy we're building so that no teen ever feels this alone or lost again. We're here to give parents the resources to support their children and the communities around them, because it takes a tribe.
This podcast is a testament to post-traumatic growth, the belief that even in the aftermath of deep grief, healing and purpose can emerge. It's a space for truth, connection, and hope, where real conversations around mental health, autism, suicide prevention, and resilience take center stage.
Healing doesn't always start with a diagnosis. It often starts with being heard, and we've created a community just for that.
Starting with this episode, the Endurant Show launches with 4 episodes over 2 weeks, starting August 27th. In this opening series, David G., our dear friend and leading voice in meditation and self-care, will interview Neal and me about our journey. It will be heavy, but powerful, and it will set the tone for the rest of the series when our renowned experts join us to bring insight, tools, and hope.
We believe that awareness is the cure. You don't have to hold your grief alone, and you don't have to run from it.
Through these conversations, we're building a community grounded in understanding, support, and lasting change. If you've ever felt alone, unheard, or unsure of how to keep going, this space is for you. Welcome.
Neal, Samara, we have shared sacred space through some of the most joyous moments of your life and through some of the most heart-shattering, soul-shattering moments of your lives. And so thank you for inviting me to spend this time with you and help as we explore the origin story of the Endurant movement, the Endurant podcast. Anthony, you as parents, you as individuals, and as a couple. Today we get to explore some of those deep, deep dives into who Anthony was and what that whole journey has been like for the both of you. And we're going to connect with so many different types of people in this process who resonate and connect on so many different levels, and I'm sure even levels that we're not even anticipating. So as we begin this origin story of this process, maybe we could start by just closing our eyes and taking a breath to get centered. Let's allow Anthony's energy to awaken in our hearts. And just watch your breath and just notice it and connect to your heart. And take a long, slow, deep breath in here. And just let that go. And when it feels comfortable, feel free to open your eyes. What you're about to speak out loud, I'm sure will be very challenging and difficult. Probably cathartic as well. So maybe you could just start by telling us just a little bit about Anthony.
Well, first off, thank you so much for joining and interviewing us. We couldn't think of anybody better to help us unlock the origin story, as you mentioned, and for the reasons you've mentioned. You've seen our journey through before Anthony's life through this experience. So we're so grateful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Honored to have you here with us and to help guide us through this process of unfolding and unraveling and telling of our story. It's really wonderful to be with you today. And Anthony, his spirit is very strong and continues to be, and always had a light for us that unraveled possibility and showed us ways of expressing our life and the essence and purpose of why we were here in new ways. I think he still invites us to do that and to show up in a new way. We, even just from his conception, we had challenges and struggles through all of the possibility of his existence, through his physical manifestation, and now through his transition. It's offered us opportunity for growth and for expansion every step of the way, just from even the beginning of wanting to be parents to having to surrender to more of divine timing for us. This isn't something that we've been able to control. This has consistently been a spiritual experience and an opportunity for us to let go and to trust in a higher purpose, a higher calling, a higher spiritual. I don't even know how to describe it. It's been a need for us to surrender to the divine. So his presence in our life has really been a catalyst for growth on so many levels. While he was here in his body, he continued to push beyond boundaries of possibility that, we were constantly amazed by how he went beyond what we saw as possible, whether that was just his academics or his physical, doing marathons, his physical endurance, and then with his courageous choice to end his life. Those are things that were beyond possibility of what, beyond what we saw as possible. And then he just would explode and expand and, constantly surprising us.
Anthony was so multidimensional. Mm-hmm. And so everyone who's connected with you or with him or with your daughter, Belina, has a different access point to who he was, maybe based on where they met him at a certain point in his life, or whether they met him in school or what he was doing. And there is this additional neurodivergent type of thread that runs through everything that he lived as well. What lit him up? What was he was a hard-charging individual, very, very committed, dedicated to whatever was in front of him at the time. And so, what were some of those things that lit him up that he was so dedicated to?
I would say in recent years, it was his friends. You hit the nail on the head. Like, Ant owned every moment, and he lit up every room that he came into. And his gift to be present with whomever he was with and help them experience great emotions and quality of relationships, I think, was his true gift. So many of his friends and even some family had no idea of his diagnosis of high functioning autism. So he lit up the room. It's much like you said, whatever he was involved in, whether it was hanging out with friends or whether it was his job at Kai's, at a restaurant, working with patrons and things like that. He was just so present and connected, and his energy and ability to relate to other human beings was extraordinary. And to help them feel safe and loved was really one of his true gifts. With that came so much challenge behind the scenes, and in raising him, most did not see what we experienced in the day to day, the toll that it would take on him, that black and white thinking, the energy and cognitive fatigue that went into those relationships. But by and large, the experiences that he had across the breadth of people he interacted with was truly special.
This concept of high functioning, that's really the thing that masked the true depths of what was going on internally. Was there a certain point in his upbringing where it became very apparent to you that he clearly had this challenge, but also clearly was high functioning?
I mean, the high functioning also shows up as brilliance. And I distinctly remember reading this Iron Man book with him, and he wasn't yet of the age where he could read words and understand words. And he liked to read the same book over and over again. So night after night, we'd read this book. And I mean, we had maybe been reading it for a week or two. And at some point I stopped, and he continued to tell me the words on the page. And I turned the page, and then he continued to tell me all the words that were on the page. And he had memorized the entire book. I mean, we went page for page. And so, I mean, I don't know, was he 4, 5, memorizing, the hundreds of words in a book, something that, really let him up. The superheroes, the hero's journey, his passion was around overcoming challenges. He was a black belt in karate. He wanted to do the endurance races. He pushed himself to keep going. But yeah, with some of the emotional regulation and social understanding, we also read together The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And I remember the scene where, Aslan is coming out, and I was weeping because it was so beautiful. And he looked at me and he was like, stop doing that. Like, why are you doing that? Like, he wasn't relating and understanding the empathy, the emotion. It was like, it made him uncomfortable because for him, it was just these facts, not really being able to relate to that, the emotional side of it. So I think he struggled with how to express that, expressing emotions. I think that definitely was a big challenge. And not that, I mean, we felt like as parents, we were open and, sharing with, like, it was okay to cry. I mean, we weren't saying like, don't do that the other way, but I think for him, just kind of being uncomfortable with that. And
and then I remember that night where you said he shared with you, Mom, please read in your normal reading voice. And so those early years was when it would become clear to us that sort of disconnect, for lack of a better word, between the facts, the experience, what was happening versus the emotion that one might feel having that experience. And then in his later years, especially early high school years, where that high functioning really came to be, and it was confusing for us, was from the outside world looking in, and even for ourselves, Anthony was thriving, right? 4.6 grade point average, all the AP classes, going to the gym at 5:30 in the morning before school, training for Spartan races after, a beautiful and diverse group of friends, hosting parties, was an entrepreneur, had a job at the restaurant. Everyone would be saying, wow, Anthony's so successful, he's doing so well. And for us, it kind of had that feeling too, but we also lived with him day to day and knew the challenges and the cost that sort of performance was creating for him. And what became clear, unfortunately, was with that high functioning and that black and white thinking and his desire to achieve, I would say he aced the science of achievement. Here's this goal, I'm going to go get it. Here's this goal, I'm going to go get it. Here's this goal, I'm going to go get it. And he was not someone, he used to talk about this a lot, like that was extrinsically motivated. He loved his psychology classes. He was more intrinsically motivated, but he would get a lot of feedback. But what happened though with each new achievement was this feeling of, well, what is all this for? Or this expectation that there would be some bigger piece. And what really lacked for him was that art of fulfillment. That high functioning created such black and white, such achievement, such the appearance of success, that lost in all that was that core aspect of fulfillment. What does this really mean?
When you speak about this concept, and you and I have talked about this a lot, at what cost? At what cost? So do you think he was actually aware of the cost, or was he just so clear on his direction that those other things in the rearview mirror just didn't matter?
That's a really good question.
That's a great question.
I don't know that he was aware of the cost, because quite frankly, I don't know that we were aware of the cost. It was so black and white, so polarizing. You have this experience of success and thriving and this experience of struggle. And you're like, what am I supposed to do here? We would encourage more rest, more sleep, sort of slowing down, but that seemed to be what charged and elevated him. I do have a hallucination that in the end, he was aware of the cost. And I think to some extent, that's when things got really hairy, was like potentially not being aware of the cost and then starting to have this realization, like, what is all this for? And why do I have all these things? And then potentially being faced with the cost. But truly, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think he, in journals and through knowing him, we saw that the quality that he valued the most in himself was discipline. And he was the epitome of discipline, no sugar for years, the gym before school, after school, the regimented schedule and routine. And I think the discipline, I know when I'm disciplined in my life, there's some good feelings that come with that too. It's like, wow, I'm doing this. I'm on this program. I've, achieved these things. I feel good about that. I think for him, it was such a pattern, and it became like his identity, that he wasn't necessarily able to separate it and to see that this was something he was doing versus something that he was. And so he was incapable of separating that from who he was, to be able to acknowledge that that was an achievement that he had versus it just became who he was. And it was so far down the track of that he couldn't let go of that grasp and that tight hold on, I have to do this. So I think it's almost like the discipline became too much and he became overly consumed with that part of his identity to be able to step back and observe how it was affecting him.
Yeah. I mean, we can refer to that as, obsessive compulsive behavior,
Mm-hmm.
or as I have often thought of Anthony, devotional.
Right. Yeah. And it's a
Point
fine
me in the
line.
direction. If it's a thing I love, I'm 150% into it. I'm devotional to it.
Right.
And I'm not acting a certain way. I'm not trying a certain way. This is who I am. This is how I'm showing up. This is me merging with that thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And even, he liked fishing. So he would go fishing with his friends. And then it was, okay, I'm going to go every day. And then I'm going to get the rods. And then I'm going to, create the fishing lure business. And then I'm going to create the apparel company. And then I'm going to have the apparel company on an Etsy store. And then it was
do
just
all that.
And do all of that.
Right.
I mean, that we had a garage full of fishing stuff that was his, and
People buying stuff online.
Right. I mean, he
Yeah.
was so devotional with this, and he apparently was able to see and really grasp the big picture on all of this.
Mhm.
Yeah.
This is classic Jeff Bezos, Elon
Mhm.
Musk,
Right?
Steve Jobs,
Yes.
and Ant,
Yes. Yes.
being able to do that process. Anthony almost was 17 years old when he took his life. And what an amazing lifetime packed into those short years. Certainly, the last 5 of those years, he was so devotional in so many different areas. Are there things that now you look back on and say, we missed that?
I mean, yeah, without question, especially on the high functioning autism side and its correlation to suicide. When we learned of Anthony's suicidal ideation, it was his freshman year. We got a call from one of his best friend's moms that her son had shared with him that Anthony had these thoughts, and that started a journey for us down a mental health journey of depression and anxiety and suicidal ideation. And I think we were so shaken, we just followed whatever was in front of us, 988, mental health institutions, followed Anthony's lead. And I don't know, I don't want to get too stuck in regret. We had no idea the correlation between high functioning autism and suicide, that these kids are nearly 30% more likely to take their own lives, especially coming out of coming out of COVID, which had a massive impact on Anthony's mental health. And then also being a young teen, he was more than 60% likely to do this. We had no idea, nor did we have any awareness of some of the things that we've since come to learn, which is why we founded this whole mission that could help neurodivergent, especially the high functioning teens, grow through this, much in like you shared it, giving some of these superhero examples. So without going too far down a tangent, sadly there are things that, at least speaking for myself, I look back on and wish I would have known or done differently, all the way up to that night, knowing that, or having a sense that he was in trouble. But we also believe that we're being called to something greater, that he's led. So that's what helps me, at least, through that second guessing, regret. The only thing I would share is, like, we took his suicidal ideation very seriously. And in hindsight, it's hard not to question whether we took it seriously enough.
And I think from my perspective, what I would say to someone else, a parent whose child is maybe struggling, is, I mean, this is full, like, disclosure. Like, I thought that it was sort of scared out of him. Like, he had gone into a treatment facility, and when he came out, he seemed so transformed and like, whew, that's behind me.
Right.
I'm never going to have to deal with that again.
Good thing I addressed that.
Right. And I thought, like, okay, we're stepping forth. And he had so many practices, yes, of discipline, but also of self-care, that, you know, he ate really well. He did prioritize sleep. He did, you know, work out. He got fresh air. He, you know, had social relationships. He spent time with friends and family. So all of these things that, like, we recommend for mental health, like, he was doing. So I felt like, okay, we're beyond that now. Like,
right. And he saw his body as a temple.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
you mentioned there was that moment where the both of you were sort of like posing in the mirror,
Yeah.
after a big challenge and after a big workout.
Yes.
And so you wouldn't think that someone who had such respect for their physical body would be their next step.
Right.
And we're going to explore this a little bit deeper, but before we move into the day of, is there anything that you would want to share about who he was up until that moment, and this magnificent, beautiful boy that
very, very kind soul and spirit. And I can remember times of going into New York City where his sister was lit up and charged, and here we go, and we'd go out to eat, and he would have his fill, and it was like, oh, well, you're not going to eat that? We need to take that and give that to the guy outside in front. I mean, just constantly thinking about other people, other humans. There was another story that we were told about at his work at Kai's. You know, there was an entree that, there was an error in the order, and there was an extra entree, and instead of, all the other coworkers were like, oh, okay, well, who's going to have it? Who's going to enjoy this great salmon or whatever it was? And he said, wouldn't it be cool if we brought it up to someone and just surprised them? Like, he was constantly thinking about how he could enhance others' lives. And that really came out too in his comedic personality. He was constantly telling jokes, wanting to lighten the mood and bring joy to other people. Really, this beautiful spirit of, let's have fun. Let's make this a great experience. And on some level, did he know, he packed it in every day, with 5 a.m, I'm up, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to come back. I'm going to have my protein shake that mom made for me. I'm going to get to work, go to school, get these good grades, do these. It's like every day. Sometimes we were like, okay, wow, he's really going from one thing to the next. But you know what? He was packing it in. He's making the most out of every day, which again, that's something I think many of us aspire to do. We never know when it's going to be our last day. I mean, I think it's really a testament to his loving, generous spirit of how he was constantly bringing joy to others. And, even if maybe he wasn't experiencing it himself, he wanted to give that to other people.
I think that's so well said. I mean, Anthony is just beloved, and I'm also struck with that he packed it in. Like it was, I always had this sense when we'd go camping, there's at the YMCA, there's the adventure guides, and there's 8 campouts a season. Well, they give you 8 because they figure, families have stuff going on. I don't believe there's always an intention of making all 8, but for him, it's like, there's 8, we're doing 8. It's like, you just got pulled into that energy. Like, of course we're doing 8. So I think it's like Samara said, I think we hear this idea of live every day like it's your last, and we understand it intellectually, and we might understand it in our heart, but really actually doing it is very difficult. Now having this experience of the loss, I understand the truth of that statement. Anthony lived that way potentially as if he knew his time was short. He lived and squeezed every ounce of juice and connection out of life that he could. And it was hard. Home was his safe place to just share how hard it was and how sometimes depressed he was and tired. And so it's just fascinating. We saw what the world saw, and then we also saw its cost to him most every day.
I mean, this is a young man filled with light, filled with love, never phoned it in.
Never phoned it in, not once.
But felt that pressure probably every single moment.
Waking moment, without question.
So let's move to the day of. And what you may share may be, this is an impossible conversation to begin with.
Yeah.
So let's go into the impossible.
Let's.
And maybe you can just talk a little bit about leading up to the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, leading up to the weekend, he had just done, maybe 2 weekends before, had done the Catalina Marathon. And he was training, and a few weeks before that had done this Spartan half marathon, which is a half marathon race with obstacles. So then he was training for his next race, would have been a full marathon with obstacles. So he was registered for the full marathon Spartan race. And he got shin splints during the Catalina Marathon. And so I'd taken him to the orthopedist, and they said, the best thing to do is to stop running. And we kind of looked at each other like, that's not going to happen. Like, he's training for this race.
Here's this jet-fueled person.
Yeah,
You're just putting a lid on.
Yeah. But he knew he needed to scale back. And I know for me, when I've been training, and if I get an injury or something, you're used to all those endorphins and feeling so good from the workouts. And then you take that away. It's depressing. It just is, regardless of your neurodiversity, your depression, you're masking all the other things. I mean, that is a tough spot to be in. And he was in that spot. So physically, he was used to, I feel like that was partially like his medicine, like his daily dose of endorphins and feel good was from working out. And so he was forced immediately to, scale back from that because of this injury. That was a little bit of like physical, emotional, what was going on. Neal and I went away for our Lovers Weekend to Palm Springs, and he and his sister were there.
That's a couple hours away from here.
Couple hours away. Just, not a huge trip, but, important for us to go away and recharge for our romance, etc. And he and his sister were there alone for the first time, the two of them, for the weekend. He had been there by himself alone before, but they had friends over, they socialized, he worked, he was studying. There was a lot going on. And just one thing you had said earlier that just kind of struck me in my conversations with him that night was when I asked him, what is it? Is it relationship? Because he was sad. He was definitely sad.
really what we want to do is sort of like set the tone for where his head,
Yeah.
perhaps where his mind body was, and where yours was innocently moving in this other.
So for us, that trip was much needed. We had been pretty disciplined ourselves about these quarterly lovers weekends, we would call them. And, sometimes we'd get to go once a month, but this had been a really long time since we had gotten to do something. And it was a magical weekend for us. And we were, just that morning, we had gone on this hike and, sort of headed off into the desert and then came back in, and we were just holding hands and just sharing with how blessed we were. Just Anthony seemed to be in a good place. Belina was in good shape. Our relationship was in good shape. I mean, my business wasn't doing that well, but we were really in this place of just gratitude and blessings, like just everything. It was just this sort of magic experience and time. And then I would say a couple hours later, we got the call from Anthony like, hey, I'm really down and depressed. When are you guys coming home?
And you guys were on the return of this.
Yeah, we were on our way back. We stopped to shop and he called and he just said, when are you coming home? I think he was hungry, wanted some certainty about our return. And then when we got home, we could see it in his eyes that he had been crying. He was in his room quite a bit. And I remember I was making some food. I said, are you hungry? He said, no, I just ate. Right?
Yeah.
And he kept going into his room and was on his phone, and but he kept the door open. So I kept going in and checking in on him, talking to him, just, kind of seeking him out a little bit. Do you want to talk about it? Do you want to come sit with us? Do you want to eat with us? Do you want to watch a show with us? And wasn't really interested. He was texting his friends, on his phone, in his bed, kind of just going through something. And I just felt like I wanted to show him that I was there, that I cared, and also give him his space. He was very independent. He managed his relationships on his own. He didn't really want to include us in that. And that was fine. I respected that, was raising, what I hope to be a capable adult. And, so we were with his sister, we had eaten, we were watching a show, and he said, I said, hey, the trash bins are still out from Friday. Do you think you could bring those in? Oh yeah, no problem. And I said, thanks for helping out with your sister this weekend, driving her around. I went, oh yeah, no problem. I mean, he seemed sad, yet.
That's like a highlight for your daughter, Belina.
Yeah.
The fact that Anthony drove her around in his car, and it was sort of like a special connection moment.
Yeah, I mean, that's what was amazing about that weekend. It seemed like there was so much love and connection, and yet he was going through it. And we had seen him in these times before, and that was really the crux of our challenge, was where does his high-functioning autism start and end, and where does him being a teenager start and end? And I think that was really our biggest challenge as parents of a high-functioning autistic child, was navigating that, where that was. And, he just, it seemed like one of the other times in some regard, but it also seemed elevated, like he was really going through it. And, and then he, like Samara said, we were just relaxing, watching a show that we had invited him to. And a few minutes later, he came by and shared with us like he was going to go outside and get some fresh air, go for a walk and get some fresh air, which was one of his coping mechanisms. So we felt like, kind of like, I guess we always had with that, like, okay, good. He knows what he needs to do. And he's going to go do it. And then like we would often do, we would watch him on our phone, and inevitably he would often go up the street and down to one of his little girlfriend's house. And this particular night, he seemed stopped about a couple houses before then. He seemed to be potentially on the curb or stopped. And it was not in a place we were familiar with him being stopped. And it created some real concern for me and some concern for us about his well-being. And we were going back and forth talking through it. And I had this sense that something was the matter. And it just did. It was different than any other time. I really had this feeling or sense that something was the matter, but, same kind of thing. We didn't want to overreact, and so we were talking through it. Maybe one of his friends texted or called him back. Maybe he's sitting at the curb. Let's just give him a few more minutes. And, we did. And then, unfortunately we heard sirens in the background. I heard Samara get a call.
I had gone into bed and I was just reading, and we had been watching and tracking where he was. I thought he was probably on the phone with a friend and just had needed privacy, and that he had just kind of stopped at that spot. And my watch rang, and it was his icon, his face. And I said, "Hey, honey." And I heard, "This is Deputy so-and-so." And I didn't hear what they said after that because I jumped out of bed.
So your phone rings, his face pops up, obviously his phone calling you, and the voice on the other end is a police.
Yeah. And still at that point, I thought, I'm running up the hill. Neal and Belina are running with me.
Yeah, I heard the call and I started running. As soon as I heard her talking to them, I knew something. So
well, you knew where he was.
We knew where he was, and we knew the phone. And I really thought that it was going to be like him sitting on the curb with like a bottle of Jack Daniels, like being belligerent or something. Like he had gone and that he was causing a ruckus in the neighborhood. That was my hallucination. And instead,
even though he didn't drink or cause a ruckus.
Yeah, even though, but I just thought,
well, you were the unthinkable. Yeah. Your brain goes to the next impossible
or
scenario.
He was like being loud, or
right.
Maybe, I don't know. Not that then the deputy would say, "We have a pulse, we have a pulse, we have a pulse." And the ambulance is driving away. And what do you mean we have a pulse? What are you talking about? And he said, "Ma'am, your son has hung himself, and he's okay. He has a pulse. He's going to Scripps. We just need to ask you a few questions, and then you can go too." It's like, what? And Melina was with us. We all we were shocked. Just couldn't believe it. And they asked us a few questions. It was, I don't even know what they asked us, but some kind of protocol. We just need to talk to you. And then we went to Scripps. I mean, it's all kind of a blur, but I know they, again, questioned us. They wouldn't let us in right away. I mean, they had to rule out some kind of foul play. And then he was on the bed and unconscious. And I mean,
yeah, all wired up on breathing machine, and it was not good.
Thank you for tuning in to episode 1. This episode was a tribute to the amazing person Anthony was, and we hope it touched you. We're going to pause the story here at the point where our lives changed forever. What comes next is the aftermath of the hardest experience of our lives. In the next episode, we'll pick back up at the hospital. We invite you to take a breath with us, and when you're ready, join us there.